Good morning, Dawg Nation. I am Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Presented today by Kroger. Jam-packed here on a Friday. Big thoughts on all the weekend's games coming up. As one of our commenters, Matt Rukavina, said, was just going to settle in and relax and enjoy that. Watch some football this weekend. I'm excited about doing that. But, of course, as a lead into that, a lot of Georgia football to talk about with you today as well. We'll bring on Jeff Sentell. We'll do some UGA recruiting with him. Always excited about that. Gunner Stockton is earning some praise today. We'll give you that. Have a little bit of insight into maybe what Georgia did for its bye week. We're gonna speculate about this a bit, but I think you'll like that. And off the top of the program today, next week, big news apparently coming from the SEC. We are on tap to find out a lot about what the future of Georgia football is going to look like in terms of who it's going to be playing in the near term and the long-distance future. So we'll touch on all of that. We are glad to have you with us for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
You're going to really love the praise that one national analyst gave to Gunner Stockton. We'll give you that here coming up in just a couple of minutes. But prior to that, I want to start with what we believe is going to be big news next week from the SEC. Now, I understand why you have to do it this way, but dropping this right in the middle of the season obviously does not end up giving you nearly as much attention as it would otherwise get. And that's one of the reasons why I think off the top of the show today, we're going to deal with this, because next week when this news actually comes out, because it's Georgia-Alabama week, to be honest, we'll have a hard time giving this attention, or I should say giving this announcement the full attention that it deserves. We are expecting big news that will impact Georgia next week from the SEC. Our friends at CBS Sports reporting, and I'll show you this on the screen here right now, that I don't know if we have this, maybe we do. I'll show you this on the screen, that the SEC is going to reveal a 9-game conference schedule next week. And then at the same time, we'll also know who those annual opponents are. Those can be reviewed and I guess changed over the course of every 4 years. But next week, the speculation will be over. The announcements have been anticipated for a long time will actually happen. We'll know who Georgia's playing in 2026 and who its permanent opponents are going to be moving forward. So to give you some ideas, once again, as put into writing from CBS Sports, we've mostly been aware of all this. It begins next year. That'll be because you understand, for the last couple of years, ever since Texas came into the SEC, it's been one-off schedules of, we're going to do this for this year, we're going to reevaluate after next year. That's been the case this year and the previous year. We also had that in 2020 because of the pandemic. But starting next season, we're going to have a permanent scheduling model that should go through a full 4-year rotation and then be considered after that. It's 9 games. You'll have the 3 annual opponents. The 6 other opponents will rotate. That means over the course of a 4-year period, you will both play at home and then play at every team in the SEC, something that does not happen with nearly that regularity in the SEC here right now. And, of course, there will still be one Power 4 or Notre Dame non-conference opponent for each SEC team. Georgia, Georgia already plays Georgia Tech on an annual basis, and given the fact that the new conference opponent is coming in, you are left to wonder what happens to all of these other non-conference series that Georgia has scheduled. We've already seen the Oklahoma series canceled because Oklahoma came to the SEC. We've already seen the UCLA series canceled for a number of reasons, and my prediction is almost all of the other, if not all of the other non-conference series, I'm thinking about NC State, Louisville, Clemson, Florida State, Ohio State. My guess is all of these big series that Georgia had scheduled in future years, because of just the conundrum of adding the extra conference game, what that does to your scheduling format, that almost all of these non-conference series, if not every single one of them, are likely to go away. And we'll start hearing some of those announcements, I would guess, coming in successive fashion. But when it comes to the news about next week and the schedule release, there are a couple of things that I think stand out on this. Thing number one is that there is a very good chance, if the SEC does maybe the most sensible thing, minus your 3 permanent opponents, If you then get into your rotational opponents, then Georgia should likely be rotating to some opponents that will make the Georgia schedule feel very different than it has maybe ever before. Because ultimately, the last couple of years, the Georgia schedule felt pretty different, but all it really was, in a roundabout way, was adding Texas to a schedule that otherwise looked a lot like a normal Georgia schedule. It was that schedule plus Texas, and that was enough to make it very difficult. Texas and Alabama on the same schedule obviously will do that for you, but it wasn't wildly different than what it's been in the past. But next year, if they follow through and go into the rotation and give you the opposite opponents you've been playing, the Georgia schedule next year is going to look like unlike anything that we've seen before. Georgia's only played Texas A&M once, as you know, since A&M came to the league. They should be on the Georgia schedule, you might think, and maybe Georgia for the first time since A&M came to the league in 2012. Maybe Georgia goes to College Station. Maybe it also goes to Oklahoma. You'll probably at least have a very good chance of adding back Missouri. Because it's 3 permanent opponents, there's one team that you haven't been playing that you won't be playing next year. Just basic math would suggest that. But, Georgia doesn't play LSU all that frequently. Next year would be a year that you would think that LSU would come on the Georgia schedule. And a lot of these teams, including the team that Georgia just played, we talked about a lot last week, Tennessee, very likely you're not playing them. So get geared up for a Georgia schedule in 2026. If they do what we think they might, that could look a great deal different than any Georgia schedule in the history of this program. That's interesting. Also, somewhat connected to that, I'll say this. It is interesting to me that right now college football seems very intent on doing something that almost all the professional sports are doing the opposite of. If you've noticed, professional sports have become a lot more geographic based with their schedules. The NFL did this, it's been about 20 years ago now, I guess, but when I was a kid, the Falcons were in the NFC West. And back then it seems like, the Saints were too, that you just took teams and based on your expansion or whatever else, you just sort of plopped them wherever you had room. But somewhere along the way, the NFL reimagined its divisions and went excessively geographic based. For instance, at one point in time, Tampa and Atlanta weren't in the same division. Eventually, they became in the same division. And pretty much every division in the NFL, with the exception, I guess, of Dallas being the NFC East, their longtime traditional spot. Other than that, every division in the NFL is very geographically based. The Major League Baseball has always been organized by tradition. These teams are American League, these teams are National League teams. But we have strong reason to believe, there's been substantial reporting about this, that they're about to change this. And in the future, we could see radical realignment of Major League Baseball, more likely to happen than not, I guess, where all of a sudden now it's not traditional National American League, that especially as they look to add expansion teams, it's going to become a lot more geographic based with those divisions and those schedules. So professional sports, NBA has been like this for a while, is becoming a lot more geographic based with its scheduling and how it organizes teams. And at the same time that's happening, college football is going completely away from that. This week we've got Michigan State traveling to USC for a game that's going to start at like 11 p.m. local for those in East Lansing, because now the Big Ten stretches all 4 time zones. And the SEC, which still, as Greg Sankey loves to say, made up of contiguous states, the truth is the teams closest to you, you're not going to play them as frequently as you used to, and you're not necessarily going to play them equally as frequently as you do the teams from farther away, which is going to make the SEC different than almost any other professional sport. Where even the NFL now, you still play about half your schedule against the teams that are in your division, therefore geographically closer. But the closest SEC teams, South Carolina, Tennessee, Vanderbilt, Auburn, Alabama, Georgia's going to play them just as frequently as it plays Missouri, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Texas, whatever else. That just makes the SEC very, very different. And next year, I think Connor Riley had the note this week that Georgia, from a travel standpoint, travels the fewest miles of any team in the SEC this season. Get buckled up for the idea that next year, almost every road trip could be a very long road trip. There's just a very good chance that's the case. And if Georgia gets stuck playing back-to-back road games, which they did not do this year, that could be a pretty big deal. Just be on guard for that. There is also the idea, who will Georgia's permanent opponents be? and this is just speculation, but it is an educated guess, we know it's not going to be Tennessee for the sheer fact that Tennessee pretty much already knows who its three permanent opponents are going to be. It has to play third Saturday in October against Alabama. Most people think they'll continue their series with Florida because Tennessee-Florida historically has been I would say, a bigger rivalry than Georgia-Tennessee has been, especially given the recent dominance of Georgia in that series. And they want to play their in-state rival Vanderbilt because, let's face it, in most years anyway, maybe not this year, but in most years, who wouldn't want to play Vanderbilt every year if you could? So that's probably where you're going with Tennessee, which means, okay, well, who is it for Georgia? Well, obviously it's Florida. Even if there was only one permanent opponent for Georgia, it was going to be Florida. And if you expand it and make it three permanent opponents, the next obvious choice is, of course, Auburn. It is the Deep South's oldest rivalry. So what does that leave you for your third permanent opponent? Well, I would say that the team that has historically thought of Georgia as its biggest SEC rival is probably South Carolina. But there was also some, whether you want to call it reports or rumors, going back a couple of years ago, that South Carolina did not want to play Georgia every year for obvious reasons. And that if South Carolina was going to be a vote for conference expansion, they didn't want to see Georgia on their schedule every year for doing so. That's the speculation that's out there. That's why a lot of plugged-in observers have assumed that the permanent opponent for Georgia will be Kentucky. And if I was a betting man, I guess that's what I'm probably betting. Then when it comes out next week, who Georgia's three permanent opponents are going to be, it'll be Florida, it'll be Auburn for sure, and it's most likely to be Kentucky. Not guaranteed, but that I would say the safest possible bet. So it comes out next week. It'll be on Tuesday. We'll find out who Georgia's playing next season. Very, very different schedule, likely, than we've seen from Georgia in the past, and maybe some historic appearances at some places we've essentially never seen Georgia go. That'll come next week, in addition to the three permanent opponents that Georgia will have. It'll preserve some classic rivalries and give Georgia, if you think about if it is Kentucky, maybe a bit of a scheduling advantage over some teams that might not quite get the guaranteed game against one of the league's bottom feeders. So we'll watch for more of them that next week, but it'll be hard for us to talk about it a whole lot next week just because of how big that Georgia-Alabama game is going to be. Now, let me shift gears to something completely different. There is interesting praise out there for Gunner Stockton today, and we like this. Last week, we made fun of the folks at CBS Sports Network because they were not picking Georgia to win the game, and obviously they end up getting that very wrong. But credit to some of the folks on that panel for at least trying to get it right now. Aaron Taylor is one of the analysts on the CBS Sports Network show, and when he was giving out his game ball this week, he gave it to Gunner Stockton, which is in itself not that big of a deal. Most of you may not even know who Aaron Taylor is. But what Taylor said about Gunner Stockton in presenting him with his so-called game ball for the week, you will like this, and it sets us up for a conversation about Gunner. This is the CBS analyst Aaron Taylor, what he said about Gunner Stockton this week.
Somehow he had humility, but confidence, right? Process precedes the outcome, and he was able to block out all the noise, push the ball downfield, and lead his team to victory. So, Gunner, you represent everything that's great about football in this sport. You kept your mouth shut, and you delivered when it mattered most. You pushed all the chips in on yourself. You bet on yourself, and you dropped a dime and rose to the moment when your best was needed. That, to me, is what this game is about.
I think that's great praise from Aaron Taylor for Gunner Stockton. It's a nice thing for Georgia fans to hear, and I do think it gets to the heart of the moment of exactly what made Gunner Stockton special last week against Tennessee. There is a overused phrases, all of these, but there is a bit of a moxie, kind of a gamer attitude, not video gamer, but gamer in terms of showing up big for the game that Stockton seems to possess. His teammates trust that about him. It's one of the reasons why his coaches like him too. I think that Aaron Taylor really describes that pretty well, which is not to say, though, that as Stockton moves into the crucial portion of the season upcoming for Georgia, there aren't still things that Gunner Stockton can do better. And I thought post-game Saturday, Kirby Smart laid this out in a really clean fashion. The stuff that he really liked about Gunner Stockton, some of which can be invisible to us, and the stuff that he wants to see still a little more from Gunner. So on a week in which Gunner justifiably is getting a lot of praise, it's also interesting to hear the analysis coming from Kirby Smart on this too. This was Saturday postgame.
I think it was immense for that. He's still, I mean, I want to judge him by watching the tape, but there's plays in there that can be made that he's got to settle down and have confidence. The best thing he's got is his legs. and he's got a good arm, but he's got to trust his legs and use them to extend plays, not just run. These guys are fast in our league. He tries to run to the sideline, and he might only get 2 or 3 yards, where if he runs north and south and sticks it up in there, he's going to find some honey holes in that pocket. I think right now and he steps back. It's hard to pass pro for a quarterback that goes back and does those things. He's growing up. He's getting better. I'm going to tell you what he did now. There's a lot of information Coach Boa put on him. Check this, do this. They had a great plan, I felt like, put together, and a lot of it was check system for him. And this crowd noise, he did a really good job in that. The first drive, guys, that was like clockwork.
So much there from Kirby Smart that all needs to be discussed. A, do not discount how much it settled down the entire Georgia team when that first drive, the scripted drive, the fast start that people want to see Georgia get off to offensively, when it went as smoothly as it did, do not discount how valuable that was for the confidence that would endure for the rest of the game. That as Tennessee's throwing its haymakers and landing some of those, the fact that Georgia was also able to do the same thing, I just don't think you can lose sight of just how important that was. Gunner Stockton plays a big role in that. Plus, there's also the stuff that Gunner is checking into pre-snap, pre-play, and there's an element of that. I don't care how much of a ball knower you portray yourself to be. There's an element of that that's just going to be invisible. And Stockton clearly was very good at that because the Georgia offense, as Kirby was saying, was essentially humming along all day long. He gets a lot of credit for that this was a very efficient, very successful day for the Georgia offense. And as we said before the season began, some of it we'll judge Gunner on is how well the running game operates, how well the offense moves along. It's not just his traditional passing stats. It's the offense overall that if Stockton's doing the right thing, then the entire offense will get a lift from that. And on Saturday, it seems like that was the case. And yet, in addition to that, you also hear a couple of things from Kirby about, hey, when you run, find a way to get the north-south yards up the middle. And, hey, be careful you don't drop back too far when you're looking to pass, and you don't create additional problems for our offensive line. And I thought that was interesting from Kirby. I would say that's somewhat deep in the weeds, or at least it's a little more below the surface than just the generic conversation. And so this week I did want to learn more about that. What exactly does Kirby Smart mean when he says that? So starting with being a different kind of runner, one that finds the most efficient lane to run in, I asked Jake Fromm a little earlier this week. Jake Fromm, of course, former Georgia quarterback, knows Gunner Stockton well. When Kirby talks about that, tell me what he means by that. This is what Jake Fromm said.
Yeah, so what Kirby's trying to say here is if Gunner decides in his head to run, he wants him to stick his foot in the ground and get north and south. That is the straightest, the quickest, the shortest distance between 2 points of the straight line. And that is basically that. Hey, stick your foot in the ground. Let's get north and south. And if we are put in a position where we're going east and west, let's get our eyes up, and then let's try to utilize our arm and push the ball down the field in these scramble situations. So, there's a few times throughout the games where, Gunner's trying to beat guys to the sideline. SEC football is a little different. Everybody's got speed. It doesn't matter if you're a linebacker, a defensive end. Obviously the secondary and the skill positions are pretty quick as well. So it just, hey, if we're getting east and west, we're getting this thing strung out to the sideline. Let's keep our eyes up and let's try to use our arm and push the ball down the field here.
And by the way, what Jake says at the end there is also something that Kirby talked about last Saturday, which was when we finally get the full scrambling component of this, and y'all think about what you don't like as a fan. Is there anything more annoying than the quarterback who runs around? I'll tell you who was good at this was Baker Mayfield. We played them in the Rose Bowl, as much as it pains me to admit. He's just running around, he's scrambling around, then boom, all of a sudden he's just throwing the ball deep down the field because he scrambled around and made something happen. And that's what Jake says. If you get stuck going east to west, that's not going to become an efficient running play because of the edge rusher types in the SEC. But if you get flushed out of the pocket and now you're running east to west, and then you look down the field and you use a scrambling opportunity to create more time for you to throw the ball, well, that's a chance to do something much different offensively. I like that. From a running standpoint, Kirby says, you're better just staying in the pocket, going up the middle, getting some positive yards. And I'd say that's not just a third and fourth down thing. That can be an early down thing, because if you sneak out and get yourself 4 or 5 yards on first down, for instance, think about how much easier it is to stay ahead of the chains on the rest of that drive. I think that's really valuable. But what about the other part that Smart mentions of Be careful that you don't drop back too far. Be careful that you don't move around so much we can't establish a pocket for you. Give our offensive line a chance to do for you what it needs to be done. Probably not surprising that when it comes to something like this, that Jake Fromm would be – it's almost like the players union here. Jake Fromm on the side of the quarterback that, hey, you know what? As John Stinchcomb said a little earlier this week, why don't you stand in there and take that hit when the pocket's collapsing? Jake Fromm had his own way of saying that this week too.
Hey, this is much easier said than done.
Sure.
There is a revolving door. There's injuries. I'll call it for what I see it and the way it is. I just don't think that offensive line has played all that great in pass protection. And that is messing with Gunner's internal clock. There are max protection opportunities, and during those max protection play calls, I mean, he's getting hit a second and a half after that back, after the snap, and as soon as he gets that back foot in the ground, he's getting hit, and that should not be the case. So I really kind of feel for Gunner on this and trying to figure out that internal clock of what's going on and what he has time to do. And, that's why he's, you kind of see maybe with happy feet back there and trying to get east and west so he can see things going on and he feels more comfortable out there. So this is going to be something that isn't going to get fixed overnight. It's not going to get fixed over the bye week. This is going to be something that's going to get marginally better week in and week out. It's going to be something to monitor throughout the season. But I think for Georgia and Gunner to be his best, he's going to have to at some point get very, very comfortable in that pocket and start delivering the ball from there. But also don't get too carried away, because what makes him Gunner, what makes him great, is being able to extend plays as well. So it's a delicate dance he's going to have to battle throughout the season. But I think for him to be the thrower and the passer that he needs to be, we're going to have to get comfortable in that pocket.
I think that's a really interesting piece of analysis from Jake Fromm there. And I want to give some context for all of that we're talking about. Well, here's what Gunner does well, and here's what he needs to be better with. And boy, you love his moxie. You love the, what did Aaron Taylor say? This is what football is all about. You love that stuff about Gunner, and yet on the field, there's also room for improvement with his performance overall too. But the context of this is what's being said about Gunner Stockton right now through 3 weeks. Very different, by the way, this week than it was a week ago or 2 weeks ago. It's also coming in at a time in which a lot of other conversations about other quarterbacks, frankly, aren't nearly as pleasant as we thought they might be. I want to show you this on the screen for a minute. This comes from Bill Conley, a story that I read this week at ESPN.com. Here's the headline. It's a preview of the upcoming week. It says, College Football Week 4. DJ Lagway, Arch Manning look to get it right. That's the headline from ESPN.com. What Conley writes in his story is that coming up this week, we get another chance to figure out which of a large group of hyped but struggling quarterbacks, including Texas's Arch Manning, Clemson's Cade Klubnik, Florida's DJ Lagway, and LSU's Garrett Nussmeier, are going to steer themselves out of a current skid. That's matter-of-factly stated by an ESPN writer, that the quarterbacks that we thought of as the best, for the most part, to begin the season, have not really played that way to begin this year. And a couple of them, at least, are struggling bad enough where you wonder if maybe they're just heading for seasons in totality that are not nearly as impressive as we thought they might be. We don't yet know enough to say that definitively, but we can say for certain that the so-called best quarterbacks in college football haven't necessarily played like that here right now. And the fact that Gunner Stockton has seen such an uptick in the chatter and praise about him in the face of other quarterbacks who seem to be struggling, I don't know that that's, and we can bring that down, I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing at all, and certainly appropriate context for the ongoing conversation about Gunner. He seems to be, at least based on Saturday, and all this could change, of course, he seems to be on the ascent at a time in which the other quarterbacks who were thought to be better than him before the season began are anything but that at the moment. Now, let me do one quick thing here before we wrap up this segment and move on and get ready to talk to Jeff Sentell and bring some other stuff into the show. We began with our discussion about the permanent scheduling model at the SEC and the expected release in 2026. As we're speaking here on this Friday morning, the SEC makes the announcement official. And the release from the SEC says it this way: SEC to announce 4 years of football opponents on a television special. I think it's interesting that in the headline from the SEC, they highlight the fact that the 4 years, the permanent opponents that are going to be released are only for 4 years. Pretty clearly, there is not a lot of agreement within the SEC about the scheduling model. There are a lot of coaches and athletic directors representing their coaches that didn't want to go to the 9-game schedule. So wording around this will be used very carefully because a lot of these coaches had to be, for good reason, some of them feel like their jobs are at stake. They had to be dragged kicking and screaming maybe into this, and I don't know that some of them didn't perhaps feel betrayed by the process. So there is not a lot of happy, joy within the SEC about going to the 9-game conference schedule. It's got nothing to do with the propaganda coming from the Big Ten and their willing accomplices within the national media. This is all about the competitive toughness of playing in the SEC. But either way, 7 p.m. on Tuesday, it'll be on the SEC Network and ESPN2. So oftentimes we said, how good of a media partner will the ESPN prove to be for the SEC? On Tuesday night, apparently a pretty good one. They'll put the schedule release on ESPN2, which is not a bad piece of real estate as we find out what the very near future of the SEC is going to look like. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. We are glad you're with us. No matter how you get to us, video live 10 a.m., on demand anytime after that, radio, Athens Sports Radio 960 Ref, podcast, wherever you find them, Apple, Spotify, worldfamousDawgNation.com. Just really, really, really glad to have you with us here today, and so thankful to our friends at Kroger who make it all possible today as well. And don't forget, today's a Friday, which means you get the big fuel event taking place at Kroger. And oftentimes when we do this, I always spell it out for you, Kroger.com/fuel event. And I always joke for those who don't know how to spell fuel. But the truth is I misspelled a word on one of our graphics yesterday. So certainly glass houses when it comes to that. Either way, if you go to Kroger.com/fuel event, you can find out today how you can earn 4 times the fuel points on your Friday purchases at Kroger when you use the digital coupon. So it's Kroger.com/fuel event to find out more of that. You're enjoying the fall. You're running around. You're doing all this great stuff. Well, how about saving some money at the pump? Kroger.com/fuel event gives you a chance to save 4 times the fuel points on the stuff that you're buying on Friday at Kroger when you use the coupon. So make sure you check that out today. We love having Kroger as a part of DawgNation Daily. We're happy to have all of you with us here today as well. Got Jeff Sentell coming up in a moment. A lot of recruiting talk to get into with Jeff. Got that coming up. That's going to be really exciting. Prior to that, though, let's get ready to go around the doghouse. It's presented today by our friends at Zagoria Law. And it has been an off week for Georgia, getting ready for Alabama next week. But we also have reason to believe, based on some stuff that Kirby Smart has said, also some intel we've gleaned from the past, about exactly how Georgia might be using that off week right now. Now, this is about to be wild and reckless speculation, which can be from time to time a little bit fun. But at the end of Kirby Smart's press conference this week, when the subject came up of, hey, what are y'all doing with the off week in terms of, well, you're working on yourself and eventually you'll get ready for Alabama. How about some future opponents? Do anything to get ready for those here right now? And I thought the Kirby Smart gave a good answer to that question, which leaves an idea kind of dangling in the air. Let me let you hear Kirby Smart on how Georgia uses its off week to maximum efficiency.
Yeah, our off-week strategy has always been to look at opponents furthest away first and back into the team that's most recent. So we work on everybody that we would play before the next bye week. In terms of coaches, we may not work on it with players. We don't have enough time. We work on ourselves on the field, and the coaches work on every team we have upcoming.
So it kind of gets me thinking. Kirby Smart says, we're going to work on all of our future opponents starting furthest away and then working back. Now, eventually he says that's all the teams between now and the next bye that Georgia has prior to when it plays Florida. But it was that first sentence that I couldn't quite help but think of when Smart says, yeah, we're going to work on all our future opponents starting from back to front. At first, when I first heard that, I'm thinking, wonder if that includes Georgia Tech. A lot of Georgia fans couldn't help but notice Georgia Tech's gotten itself quite a lot of attention as of late for having beaten Clemson and, whatever else it is they've done. I guess they won at Colorado, which to some was a big deal. So Georgia Tech, to begin this season, has gotten itself a lot of attention. And some Georgia fans are looking at that Black Friday afternoon, Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and we thought there was a chance this would be true. Suddenly that feels like a much bigger game than maybe we're used to Georgia Tech being, especially after last year's 8 overtime thriller. Suddenly the Georgia Tech game feels a little bit big again. And I think some Georgia fans are wondering, hey, given the grind of the SEC and given Georgia's end of season goals, is Georgia going to be as ready for that game as maybe some folks think that Georgia Tech's going to be? Or maybe some fans are also thinking, I'm tired of Tech walking around like they've done something just because they beat a Clemson team that Georgia beat last year 34-3. We would say that fans are also well within their rights to think that too, if that's what they're thinking here right now. So I was kind of wondering, well, I wonder if there's any room in an off week to get ready for Georgia Tech, to at least, and maybe don't even tell the players that's what you're doing, but Tech, not quite triple option the way that it was back in the Paul Johnson era, but it's still with Buster Faulkner as offensive coordinator, still kind of a particular style of offense. And pretty clearly, I mean, they run Haynes King 100 times a game. I almost feel sorry for that young man, but they run him 100 times a game. And they've had success doing it, and they've had success doing that against Georgia. And you'd like to think that this time around, maybe Georgia's just a little more ready for it than they were in the past. Any chance they're getting ready for Georgia Tech in a week like this? Kirby Smart says it's mostly future opponents before now and the next bye. But I do want to go back in time for a moment. I'll say this real quick. I mean, we got to bring on Jeff Sentell after that. So we're obviously in year 11 for our show. We're celebrating our 10th anniversary. We have that graphic on the screen each and every day. And when you go back and look at what this show looked like, what I looked like many, many years ago, it's really jarring. You know, much less gray hair. You know, my weight sort of up and down throughout the years. So that's not necessarily a giveaway of when the show was taking place. But either way, I went back to look for a very old clip today because honestly, a lot of the clips that I've saved throughout the years, I just don't have them as much anymore. So I had to go back and find an old clip from the show. And it was from the very first player analyst we ever had as part of our DawgNation postgame show. We've been thrilled in recent years to work with a lot of former players. The very first one we ever worked with was the punter from the 2017 team. Do you remember Cameron Nizelek? Nizelek was a super smart guy. He came from like some, fancy Ivy League school or something like that. Super smart guy. Really great guy. I loved working with him. We did that every year back in 2017, or I should say 2018, on our postgame show. Nizelek was great to work with. And leading into the Georgia Tech game in 2018, which is now a long time ago, back when Paul Johnson was still running the option, Nizelek revealed to us, and this was on our postgame show from the UGA bookstore way back in 2018, about just how serious Kirby Smart as a Georgia alumnus was about Georgia Tech, and just how many moments during a year he found some time to maybe work on the Jackets during practice, because you want to be ready at the end of the season for an opponent that's maybe just a little bit different than you see during the year. At the time, it was triple option. This is what the former Georgia punter Cameron Nizelek said on our DawgNation postgame show going back many years ago.
Just a little peek behind the curtain. Kirby Smart hates Georgia Tech. Throughout the season, they actually, once a week or so, they do a little period for Georgia Tech. Even though we're not playing them, they focus a little bit on Georgia Tech every week. So it's something that we prepare for, the option, so that when it comes down to the last game of the season, we're ready for it.
So there you go. Nizelek said, and back then it was triple option, hey, Kirby hates Georgia Tech, always doing a little stuff, a little bit here and there, maybe once a week, just to make sure you're ready for that when you see it. And, of course, this year's version of Georgia Tech, not quite as particular and peculiar as the old triple option would have been, but at the same time, if Kirby says, yeah, we're working on some future opponents, some of it's just coaches, it's not all players, you can't help but wonder, with a big Black Friday game looming against Georgia Tech, given what former players have told us in the past, were there a couple of minutes being paid to that game? And is Georgia ready to make a statement and clean old-fashioned hate to end the season? Some former Georgia players would say, yes, indeed, that will definitely be the case. So we'll make that around the doghouse. It's presented today by our friends at Zagoria Law. And I'm telling you right now, we love having Zagoria Law around the doghouse with us, because if you are around your own house and one of your neighbors has a dog that gets free, and that's negligence, we would say. And if that dog bites you, if it injures somebody you love, knocks them down, something like that, well, just like any other personal injury situation, we would say you deserve your chance to fight for compensation on that. And you want to fight with folks who literally wrote the book on how to win these kinds of cases. That's what Zagoria Law is all about. So I want you to find them online, Zagoria, ZagoriaLaw.com. Also give them a call, 833-GA-DOG-BITE. They're the the folks in Georgia that know all about how to fight for you, get the compensation you deserve if you're in a situation where you've been bitten by a dog, injured by a dog. They have specialized in this very narrow area of personal injury law, and the expertise that you gain when you narrow your focus that much, they want to put it to work for you. So if this is your story, or if it's someone you love story, think about Zagoria Law in these types of situations. 833-GA-DOGBITE. That's 833-GA-DOGBITE, or online, ZagoriaLaw.com. All right, great to have all of you with us here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. We will give you our final thoughts on the weekend's biggest games. Georgia gets to sit back and watch this weekend. What will we be watching? Well, we'll talk about that here coming up in a little bit. But for now, on everything as relates to Georgia recruiting, let's keep the conversation going. Jeff Sentell here today, DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We will sail into Jeff Sentell here, and as we've done now several weeks in a row on our show, I'm very thrilled tonight. Our drive for the GHSA state title on Atlanta News First. Myself, Rusty Manziel, calling high school football. We'll get a chance to showcase another major UGA recruiting target, a guy we've been following now for a number of years, really getting his moment in the spotlight here. That's DJ Jacobs, the edge rusher from Blessed Trinity. His brother is also a terrific defensive lineman on this Blessed Trinity team too. Jeff Jacobs, obviously a big name to know for Georgia in this class of 2027. So if you don't mind, let me start right there with, if Georgia fans tune in to watch us tonight on TV for what could be one of the most coveted prizes in this 2027 class, what exactly they'll see from Jacobs and his brother tonight as well.
Brandon, hey man, good to be on with you. This guy, let me just keep it real, Brandon. This guy is a legacy. He is absolutely the real deal. He's putting on about maybe 15, 20 pounds since his sophomore year, as he should. 6'5", about 235. Brandon, the people at Blessed Trinity, they love DJ Jacobs. Of course, he's the legacy son of David Jacobs. Mark Richt is his godfather. But, Georgia only takes one edge this year. That's Kamari Brooks. He's a really, really good one. And then also you see what happened with LaDamian Guyton and finding the Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes win with Texas Tech. And so it becomes very important for Georgia in a year where there are a lot of edge targets in the state of Georgia and surrounding states that this guy is a priority. I believe Georgia's coaching staff will be there. At least Coach Uzo Deribe will be there. And the one thing that really matters here, Brandon, is, yeah, he looks pretty. He's 6'5", he's 235. His dad played at the SEC, in the SEC. His mother was a dog. This is a very heavy Georgia family. This guy is the absolute real deal. I spoke to Milton head coach, pardon that interruption. I spoke to Milton head coach Ben Reeves recently because Milton faced Blessed Trinity. And I said, hey, man, what's your honest thought on this guy? What do you think he actually brings to the table? And he's like, man, as advertised, Coach Reeves told me, who's seen a lot of really good football players, he said he absolutely deserves all the national recognition and attention that he's getting.
I think that's really interesting. And I would say the context for this is, as it relates to, like, say, LaDamian Guyton, and I still have a little bit of a candle in the window for Guyton, but admittedly, he is committed elsewhere right now, that if Guyton maintains that commitment, then Jacobs was already going to be a prime candidate for this 2027 class for Georgia as it is. But with Guyton committed to Texas Tech, that means that makes DJ Jacobs even more important, right?
Definitely. Not only that, he gets the work aspect of it, Brandon. He's been to Georgia many, many times. His younger brother, Dawson, who they do want to play together, is an SEC prospect in the 2028 class. He's a bigger defensive tackle type, really effective at what he does too, Brandon. Let me share two tidbits of intel here. Number one, DJ is on the homecoming tour right now. He's on the research tour. He's seen Miami. He's seen Florida State. He's seen Notre Dame recently. I believe he's seen Oregon as well. This Georgia visit that he's planning next week for Alabama has been planned for forever. And here's one thing I really know about this recruitment. Wherever DJ Jacobs goes, I'm sure there's going to be a heavy NIL component attached to it. Wherever he goes, though, I've been told that he's going to go to a place that is proven, proven to put guys in the league, proven to develop guys at his position. So for me, that's going to take out some of those outliers that are not the true blue bloods that are just going to try and win the lottery and win the bidding here for DJ Jacobs.
Obviously, I think the Blessed Trinity is on tap tonight, expecting a lot of major coaches perhaps visiting Georgia staff. You would assume on hand to see Jacobs tonight, something you may see on TV if you tune in to see us on Atlanta News First. How about other Georgia coaches, other priorities? With Georgia not playing on Saturday, it does give chances for coaches to be out and about here and seeing prospects. Anything else that you expect to see from this weekend as it relates to that?
Yeah, I expect Georgia to go see Ryan Mosley, the Carrollton wide receiver commitment. James Coley, the wide receivers coach, is expected to be there. And Brendan, I don't know how I feel about this, but there's a report out. There was a report out, I believe it's by on3.com, that says that Georgia's running backs coach Josh Crawford will be in Tennessee to see Daniel Georges. And that's the young man that really has been heavily linked right now of late to Tennessee and Ohio State. Georgia was in it a little bit higher up the totem pole earlier, but it seems like that young man is maybe elevated Tennessee and Ohio State. Of course, the young man's in Chattanooga. You can explain why you would hear a lot from the Volunteers on that front. But Georgia is expected to show face, and that always means something, especially in the junior season now. Because, Brandon, this will get you back in the time machine a little bit. At this time on Friday nights, in seasons past, many seasons past, we'd be talking about Georgia coaches on the road to go see hotly contested recruiting battles for seniors.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the new normal is for them to do that with juniors.
Yeah, and especially when you think about, I guess the proposed calendar changes here too, where, a lot of this recruiting work is going to be even more front-loaded, right? What the reporting is out there that December is going to be dead, that they're going to have, transfer portal, one window in January. That's one of the reasons why I think we see the coaching carousel spinning so soon already. We've seen 2 coaches fired. That the one, and it's almost like you can't accelerate the calendar any more than it already is, but acceleration of the talent acquisition calendar, that just seems to be the name of the game right now.
I feel like there are 2 things to think about there, Brandon. You made some good points there on kind of the timestamps, but the other things that are happening are, number one, most of the SEC rosters are already kind of bought and sold, the current rosters for their high school careers, for their college careers. So what you're going to see there is you're going to see maybe more of an investment in the freshmen, the guys that haven't gotten any big time money from these schools yet, but also trying to balance that with the new revenue share deal and what's expected to be around 15 to 16 million in revenue share payments to athletes in the years to come. Now, of course, they can get above that in traditional NIL, but you're going to see a lot of that where, it's kind of different. And the other main thing, Brendan, for this pushback that I sense the coaching fraternity really got together and got to some sort of momentum and some sort of accord here, because what they really wanted with the demolition, I'll use that word, of the spring transfer portal is coaches were tired of looking around during spring practice and during off-season workouts in February and March and going, is this going to be my team? Is this the team I'm going to have for the fall? And now with the removal of that spring transfer portal window, you've got that.
I think that's really interesting. You had a great story this week. Nick Abrams, linebacker, very important part of this Georgia 2026 class, got a very prestigious visitor to see him play. That's the great former Georgia linebacker, and even after all these years, still as beloved as anybody, Roquan Smith. Jeff, for those who haven't had a chance to read the full story at DawgNation.com, how did all of this come together?
It's interesting because over the years, this is not the first recruit that Roquan has done this with. Basically, he's available if a recruit wants to reach out and learn what his time was like at Georgia, how Coach Schumann in Georgia helped him. So it was really intriguing because Nick was talking to Roquan even before his commitment. And then when he committed, Roquan was in his Instagram feed, the live feed of his commitment on his Instagram. And he said something to the effect of, "We'll talk soon." And those guys have been talking. Roquan actually watched his film, much to the bewilderment of Nick. He's like, "Man, how do you have the time to do that, to watch my film and give me tips?" But he also said one of the things in their conversations was, "I'll come by and I'll watch you at a game this year." Now, without making this too much of a Hollywood movie, the reason why it's possible is Nick Abrams is in Maryland. That's where Roquan Smith is at in the DMV. So yeah, he stopped by. It wasn't that big of a trip, but he showed up. Here's the fun part of this, Brandon. Nick Abrams makes a pick six on a tipped ball, right? He picks up the interception, goes into the house. He house calls it for his second pick six of the season. Already a pretty noted feat there as it is. And then as he coming up the sideline and people are congratulating him, there's Roquan who says good play, or who says nice play. And he's like, oh my gosh, was that Roquan? Was that Roquan Smith? And it was. So I mean, he's already very happily, gleefully committed to Georgia. But things like that, Brandon, the fraternity, and there you see the pick six right there. Great job by our producers here.
Yeah.
But he already knows that Georgia is a fraternity, but then he sees that from Roquan, and then he sees how well like guys like Chris Cole and other current members of the team have welcomed him. I mean, they're even playing some EA college football on streams together or on online together during the season or during the summer. So when people say that the Georgia's LBU is a little bit different, not just because of the players they put in the NFL, but how the guys are really kind of one unit and one of a family. When you see the Pro Bowler Roquan Smith show up at your high school game on a Friday night, that's uncommon.
I think it's also worth pointing out, too, that while a lot of former Georgia linebackers going to have a lot of credibility in a situation like this, Roquan very likely has more credibility than anyone in the fact that not only was he a first-round pick, which, to be honest, is a little bit rare for an inside linebacker, he also got the second big free agent contract, too. So you don't see a lot of inside linebackers get the real money in the NFL. Oftentimes, those types of contracts just go to players of the positions. But Roquan is the first-round pick who got that big, 8-figure bonus, and then got the big free agency contract on top of that. So I would imagine that if you are a inside linebacker, you view Roquan Smith as the most credible of all voices just simply because he has traveled the path that everybody wants to go. He has legit got paid for all the great work that he's put in over the years.
The pitch was actually perfect too, because Abrams grew up a Baltimore Ravens fan. He told me the way he watches Georgia now, jumping up at the television, yelling, screaming, jumping up and down, the way he watches Georgia now is always the way he has watched the Ravens. So now when he watches Georgia, he's like, I know that guy. I know that guy. I know that guy. And it really feels different, especially coming from a guy like Roquan, who, not only that is he's made the money, he's came through the Georgia system with Glenn Schumann. And, one of the things he said that was pretty interesting that said a lot without really being over the top with it is he said, man, I'm going to take one of these pictures and I'm going to send it to Shu because I know he'll want to do something with it. That just kind of shows you a little bit behind the velvet rope a little bit about why Glenn Schumann in Georgia is so successful recruiting these elite linebackers.
Well, it's also, we did a thing early in the show about DawgNation Daily from a long time ago in our 10th anniversary year. There's nothing that feels more, we've been doing this for going on 11 years than this particular topic here, because when you and I would have first had our conversations about Roquan Smith, and we did have these, he was essentially just starting his Georgia career, coming out of that, recruiting process that year, basically a freshman on that 2015 team. And now we're talking about him as the stately veteran. Oh my gosh, can you believe that Roquan Smith is coming to my high school game? Like, you want to get a really good snapshot of just how long you and I have been having these conversations together. A player that we essentially once talked about as a recruit is now the stately presence in the lives of other recruits. That gives you an idea how long we've been doing this.
Man, it's kind of great to think about that, the time span, Brandon. One other thing about this story, I think it's great. I know you have your own takes about taking pictures, but like he's sitting there and he's cheesing up because he's got to get a photo with Roquan, because Roquan also brought Teddy Buchanan, another Ravens linebacker, there to his game as well. So this was like celebrity row. And he's like, I'm taking a picture with Roquan. Like, what do I do? And first of all, it's like, where do I put my hands? Do I do this? Do I do that? And he's like, oh no. He's like, I thought I was going to smile. But then he's like, Roquan's got that intensity, man. So he's like, I got to match what Roquan's doing. So he comes up with one of those faces and puts the ones up. And you see that, and you listen to that story, that just feels like a real human being type story. getting the chance to hang and interact and get advice about college football and playing linebacker from one of his idols. And Brendan, I know the way you've done this over the years, man. I bet you're probably looking at that photo going, man, Nick Abrams is in high school. And look how he looks sized up next to
Oh,
Roquan
yeah.
Smith, the Pro Bowler. I mean, that's a pretty good growth chart. That's a pretty good measurement for whether or not he's good enough to play linebacker at Georgia.
All right, two very quick things. We'll let you go. Thing number one is this. Obviously, looking ahead to next Saturday, it's one of those major marquee recruiting opportunities for Georgia. Any idea what the early visitor list looks like right now?
Yeah, it's going to be the best one of the year, especially if we're wondering what's going to happen with the Texas game later this year. And maybe the bloom will be off the rose a little bit with that team by then. Really, Brandon, anybody that's being recruited by Georgia that wants to go to a Georgia football game this year, they will be there. The luminaries start with Jared Curtis, the 5-star quarterback who will be making his first visit to Georgia. He has promised that he is going to be at every remaining Georgia home game this year. He missed one because of an ACT. He missed another one because he had mandatory film with his coach. But he's going to be there. DJ Jacobs, the guy we just spoke about, is going to be there. Georgia's probably main remaining undecided target, Jared Jai Dowdy at Banneker High School. Brandon, that's the young man who put on 60 pounds since his junior year a year ago, and now he's a 6'6", 300-pound elite offensive tackle. He was committed to Georgia State. He decommitted there. Man, Brandon, Alabama's offered him. Georgia's offered him. Georgia was kind of one of the first through the door. And then just today, Ohio State has offered him as well. So that's a young man that's picking up a lot of speed, perhaps is the top remaining undecided target for Georgia in the 2026 class. For those that are fans of, hey, is Georgia going to get another running back in this class besides Jay Lamar, who had 5 touchdowns last Friday night? There's a young man at Sandy Creek, Amari Latimer. He's a guy that's been blowing up, currently committed to Wisconsin. Most that follow this stuff day to day, Brandon, with their ear on the ground, we will know just how close Georgia's shot is with Mr. Latimer if he takes a visit for the Georgia versus Alabama game. So it's a lot of show and it's a lot of tell to see, does Georgia really have a shot with this guy? And besides all that, Brandon, besides seeing all the 2026s that are going to stay in the fold, Nick Abrams is also going to be there, the guy we mentioned earlier. But the key pieces of the 2027 class, I'd expect every 5-star that Georgia's tracking to be there to watch Georgia play on that big Saturday night in Athens.
And then let me finish with this, if you don't mind. Obviously, last Saturday, away from recruiting here for a moment, one of the great moments we've had in Dog Nation, one of the thrilling wins for Georgia against Tennessee. There have been a lot of thrilling wins for Georgia as of late. I'm thankful for that. This is right up there with anything that I've seen. You had a different perspective than the rest of us because you're actually watching it from the field, including the celebration that occurs right after the game came to an end. What was that experience like for you being in the midst of all of that? You know, just really remarkable Georgia win in a very hostile environment with not everybody in the world thinking they were going to be capable of doing it. Yet once again, Georgia found a way. What was it like to be an eyewitness to that?
It was kind of crazy, Brandon, because like I'm telling you, those of the people that are down on the sidelines, we experienced Ole Miss last year and what pandemonium that was in terms of a field storm against Georgia. And the uniformed security personnel at Neyland Stadium last week, they made no secrets about two big points, Brandon. Number one, that the field was going to be stormed. That's what they do in Tennessee when they beat a rival, especially a top 10 rival they haven't beaten in a while. And the second thing is they weren't going to put up much of an effort to stop it. So like you went from, okay, where am I going to go? Where can I post up? Am I going to be safer in this tunnel? Where am I going to get my photos? To, oh my gosh, field goal miss. Georgia's driving. They get a stop. Really the way the game ended, Brandon, very anticlimactic. How you basically wait for like the judge's decision, like this is a Mike Tyson Evander Holyfield fight or something like that, and you go to the cards and the cards say touchdown and game over, Georgia wins. I thought that was very unique. I was having a discussion with Jay Black, one of our producers, for our fine programs on Dog Nation, and we were trying to compare. And I want to get you thinking on this, Brandon, as well. The best 4th down pass in Georgia football history, or at least recent Georgia football history, we had to go all the way back to Michael Johnson.
Yeah, that's the first one that came to
2002.
mind. That's what came to mind for sure.
I mean, you got to think about that. Now, that one was bigger in Auburn because that was an undefeated team, and that was trying to keep Georgia alive for the keep Georgia alive in the playoffs and everything else like
Was
that.
the SEC Georgia had never won the SEC East. I mean, people forget there was a time in which just winning the SEC East seemed like an unimaginable accomplishment, and so the Johnson catch from David Green, which by the way we'll see David Sunday night on the Hebron Christian side. But the point is that was an unimaginable accomplishment to win the SEC East, something that Georgia had never done. So I got to put Green to Johnson ahead of this, but that's still really, really good.
Especially the circumstances, especially the throw where it took. Most people have weighed in. Even our good friend David Bellamy said that it took great internal fortitude. Let me clean that up a little bit in order to make that throw from Gunner and Bobo and everyone else. But it's definitely one of those moments, Brandon. I was having some fun and some online banter with some Tennessee folks this week. And they were wondering, because I had one of my stories, I had the word shock in there. And they're like, why was it shocked if Georgia was undefeated and has all these championships and this higher ranking in this streak? Why was it a shock that Georgia won that game? And I had to point very matter-of-factly to the ESPN win percentage index, I believe. And at one point of the game, right before Gunner hit London Humphreys, Tennessee had a 93% chance of winning that game with about 3 minutes left. So you combine that with all the stills of the Tennessee fans, and I do believe shock is an accurate word to describe what Georgia did in Rocky Top last week.
I mean, to me, the shock is that Tennessee fans read stories.
Yeah.
Jeff, it's great to have you. Hope you enjoy the Saturday with No Georgia Football. We'll look forward to talking to you very soon, and all kinds of stuff happening tonight across the fruited plain of Georgia recruiting news, and I'm sure you'll be all over that too. Thanks for your time, and we'll talk to you soon.
Brandon, hey, Blessed Trinity, Hebron Christian, Roswell. That's going to be a popular spot tonight. I'm going to bring my talents to that sideline.
Oh my gosh, Jeff Sentell is in the building. My goodness,
that's one of those you got to make, man. Especially when it's right down the road, man. That's one of those you got to make.
Goodness, I mean, you talk about bringing out the heavyweights.
Yeah, sure.
I am sure that your arrival has been foretold, and they're going to have all the security and everything else ready to go for you, Jeff. That's really great to hear.
Hey, man, this just shows you picked a big game to call, man. That's where you need to be.
I guess so. Well, I appreciate it, Jeff, and I look forward to seeing you tonight.
See you, man.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
One of the controversies in college football this week is where ESPN's College Game Day should be. It's going to Florida, Miami. Of course, up in the Big Ten, they're like, why are you not coming to Indiana, Illinois? I think that's a question that answers itself. But the point is typically speaking, wherever game day is the big spot to be. Well, I can tell you this, on the Friday night, if Jeff Sentell's coming to your game, my goodness, that must be a big one. So we're excited about having that on TV for you tonight. Hebron Christian, defending state champs. By the way, as I said, David Green's son has been playing some quarterback for them and playing very, very well. So that's fun. They've had several quarterbacks that have played at times this year, but Green has been one of them. So we expect to see maybe some of him tonight. That should be really, really fun. And then, of course, as we said, DJ Jacobs and Dawson Jacobs on the other side, two great dog legacies. DJ, one of the top players of the class of 2027, on TV for you tonight. Drive for the GHSA state title on Atlanta News First. Now, let's get ready to go cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And y'all know, I think I said this yesterday or one of these days this week, I love Perfect Day Coco Cay. I love the private island, which Royal Caribbean's famous for. But I also love the way in which the spirit of Perfect Day Coco Cay lives into so many of the other things that Royal Caribbean is doing. And before the year is out, Royal Caribbean's going to introduce a brand new private destination in Nassau in the Bahamas. And to me, this is going to be something that really is going to change the game again for Royal Caribbean, because Royal Caribbean sets the pace for all of the cruise industry. What Royal Caribbean does, others try to copy, but there is nobody that's going to have anything close to Royal Beach Club, because Nassau, for those of you who've cruised, know that it is the probably most frequently visited cruise port. Many folks feel like they've been there. Maybe they feel like they've done everything that Nassau has to offer. Well, not when it comes to the Royal Beach Club. This brand new private destination just off the port in Nassau, easily reachable by water taxi, exclusively for those on a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation, is going to bring the best of what you might think of for a Perfect Day Coco Cay or another private destination. Royal Caribbean building out several of these right now. What you might think you'd get from that, Now you'll get that in Nassau, whether you want the cabana experience, the swim up bar, you want the gorgeous beaches and water, of course. You can get all of that, including some of the ultimate family style cabanas, things like that. They've got some really clever stuff they're rolling out as a part of this. So Jessica Slater can tell you even more than I can. Special travel advisor. I love her. Good friend. Books all my Royal Caribbean Cruise vacations. She can take care of you too. Give her a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. Okay, we want to talk about some games here coming up in a moment. I do want to deal with a serious situation before we get there for a moment, and this is obviously very, very sad news, although we're still learning more about it. Connor Shaw, you'll remember him as a beloved former South Carolina quarterback. The only time South Carolina's ever won the SEC East, Shaw was the quarterback in that game. He's also the brother of Jabo Shaw. They have a deep connection to the state of Georgia. They were both at Flowery Branch. Their father was a longtime coach there. Jabo is still a coach he's back in Georgia again this year, in the state of Georgia again this year. Connor Shaw, I guess if I have the story right, I've been following the news reports, I guess the word we'll use here is collapsed while coaching his son's team earlier this week and is now in stable condition after this medical scare. The entirety of the SEC, South Carolina fans, Georgia fans, everybody else included, have all united in prayer around this. It's a very scary situation. Connor's much younger than I am even. Obviously, folks, wanting to learn more about this and figure out what's going on. So scary situation involving Connor Shaw there. The official description is in stable condition, but obviously folks have been alarmed ever since the news came out this week, collapsing during that practice. So we obviously hope the best for Connor Shaw. It's always, I would say, inspiring when you see SEC folks come together like this across fan bases, and clearly everyone praying for Connor Shaw right now. Very good quarterback. You'll remember him, been involved in football ever since then, now involved coaching his son, I guess, but going through a pretty scary medical situation. We are told in stable condition right now. We'll give you more information as that becomes available. Not easy to transition from that into something else, but do want to give you some thoughts about the upcoming games for here this weekend. And I think one of the things that is interesting to watch about the way in which Week 4 has been discussed, there is a very big difference now between the way in which college football is talked about than the way it would have been talked about years ago. For instance, we just celebrated the retirement of Lee Corso, the longtime legendary ESPN analyst. What was one of Corso's famous phrases? When people are making picks, he would jump in and say, "Not so fast, my friend." That was his famous phrase. People still do that now, and when people do it, you know who you're referencing when you say that. A very famous catchphrase. The origin of the catchphrase is the simple idea that be really, really careful thinking that college football games are too easy to predict. As I say all the time, college football games are easy to project. We know who should be favored and shouldn't in most situations. But when you dive a little deeper, going from the projection to an actual prediction, here's who's going to win and here's how easy it's going to be, the actual predictions themselves remain really, really difficult. And when too many people assume that a game is going to be too easy and, of course, so-and-so is going to do this and so-and-so is going to do that, that's where the idea of the Lee Corso, not so fast, my friend, kind of comes from. And years ago, I think the conventional wisdom was, well, if so-and-so's been playing good and so-and-so hasn't, of course they're going to win easily. But this week you see how the college ball conversation has evolved. And a lot of people do seem to be assuming that some of these games that seem easy on paper, maybe they're just not quite as easy as you might think. For instance, Oklahoma hosts to Auburn. We've said this before, that Oklahoma has been roaring its way through this season. But Auburn has a real opportunity to actually step out from what has been a bit of a quiet shadow and demonstrate that they themselves can be a bit of a contender in the SEC. Based on the way the Oklahoma's played, a lot of folks would assume, well, that's not going to happen. They're supposed to win this game by about a touchdown in their own stadium. And yet, I think there is still some thought that maybe Auburn, with the former Sooner quarterback going back to Norman, maybe they could be heard from in this particular game. I think you'll say the same thing about Missouri and South Carolina. Right now, these feel like programs going in opposite directions. Missouri's undefeated. They're riding high. One of the pleasant surprises in the SEC, although we already gave them out to you as our favorite win total before the season began, they look right now to be, fairly comfortably ahead of the pace of what was a win total to begin the season of 7.5. We gave it to you before the season began. They've played great through 3 games. Thus far, South Carolina, a little shaky, including a win that was closer than it was supposed to be, and really what was essentially almost a blowout loss to Vanderbilt at home last week. Lenora Sellers seems injured. This seems like an easy one for Missouri. Point spread would suggest that it should be. But is South Carolina going to really go out that quickly, tapping out essentially before the first month of the season's done, taking their second loss with margin? Is there a chance they dig deep, find a way to fight? It seems like some people are believing that maybe there's a chance they could do that, even though all of the odds makers are heavily on the side of Missouri. I'd be careful with this game because there's a reason that Missouri's as big a favorite as it is, but nonetheless, that's the discussion. And if that's true for the other games, that's really true for Miami and Florida. We've told you this. In many respects, this is the most interesting game of the weekend because Miami has been treated as a playoff team, and Carson Beck, who loves football again, is going to win the Heisman Trophy and all of that. I mean, Miami has been the talk of the season, certainly from the ACC, in this early stage of this 2025 season. Florida has been a laughingstock. A coach suspended for fighting, a player ejected for spitting. DJ Lagway can't figure anything out. He's thrown 5 picks. They lost at home as a 17.5-point favorite. It's been a disaster for Florida, and yet somehow, some way, they're only about a touchdown underdog against Miami. I mean, doesn't that feel like the classic Lee Corso, not so fast, my friend type analysis? I think this weekend's worth tuning in for. I really do. I think this weekend's worth paying attention to see if some of these teams who seem like obvious, easy winners, can they win easily? If they can, that's probably a statement in its own right. But maybe some of these SEC teams that are almost left for dead, including Florida, maybe, South Carolina, perhaps, maybe they can show a little bit of signs of life that lets you know they're still playing for something as the year goes on. And for a team like, say, Auburn, that has been the butt of jokes and summarily dismissed, maybe they can also demonstrate that all of that was premature too. I'll say one more thing before we wrap this up. It would be rare for me to pay attention to a game in which a team is a 40-point favorite. I got to tell you, even though it's not really on, I think, over-the-air broadcast TV, I'm probably going to be watching pretty closely for Texas and Sam Houston State. The Bearcats, spelled with a K, go to Austin, as I said, near 40-point underdogs. But in this particular situation, you're talking about an Arch Manning storyline that gets bigger and bigger with each passing week. He is struggling. And I think you get to a point where if he doesn't figure it out against Sam Houston State, with the entire world wondering, is he ever going to make it look easy? I think you start to wonder it's sort of now or never. Either Manning has a good game against what should be overmatched competition, or at least for this season, he just ain't it. Worth paying attention to there on that. We'll make that cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Before we get ready to wrap up here today, let me give a couple shouts out here for a moment. First of all, a great sponsor was a big part of our DawgNation invasion last week. We love having Academy Sports and Outdoors as a part of what we're doing here. Obviously, with my family doing what we do, we're involved in sports and outdoor activities, things like that. You better believe we're at Academy all the time. And I know that that's what you want to be there, too, because they've got everything you need for all your tailgate activities. And the prices, well, they are undefeatable because you're going to get great savings on great gear every day when it comes to Academy Sports and Outdoors. So swing by there or shop online at academy.com to get grills, canopies, jerseys, and a whole lot more. Academy Sports and Outdoors is the official sporting good and outdoor retailer of the SEC. You can get all kinds of good UGA gear there as well, all of it online at academy.com. Also, before we go here today, I've got a shout out to our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau there as well. Always the home team. You got to have insurance. Georgia Farm Bureau wants to help you with auto insurance, home insurance. If you need life insurance, you probably do. They got you on all that. So please give them a call, 877-404-1050. That is 877-404-1050 or online, gfbinsurance.com. Georgia Farm Bureau, as always, the home team. All right, my goal this weekend, after doing some high school football tonight, we're going to rest the voice. I'm going to try to speak as little as possible for 2 days. So when we come back on Monday, hopefully whatever this has been, will hopefully be starting to go away. So we're going to do our best to do that. We appreciate you being patient with me. Also, we appreciate another great week of Golden Shoe submissions. Yesterday we celebrated 1776 on our Gatorator Updater, and we continue to be having some fun with that. We'll show you this Golden Shoe submission from Josh Henry, who sent this in. It says, well, here's what I was able to come up with. Allegedly, that's you as George Washington. Here's hoping it's Golden Shoe worthy. It clearly is. Probably looks more like George Washington than it does me, but you'd love to see General Washington with all the Georgia gear around him, the Georgia-themed boat. Listen, I love that. That's pretty awesome. The patriotism and the Georgia fandom, I would say that's a pretty good blend right there. Josh Henry, very well done by you. Also, another Golden Shoe going out to our guy Bill Sanders here as well, who says, here's what it's like to be a lizard these days. Yeah, the Florida Gator with the brown paper bag over the face, a lot of embarrassment right now. Maybe they won't be quite so embarrassing against Miami on Saturday. We shall see. Hashtag Golden Shoe. That's what Bill has to say. And speaking of those lousy, stinking Gators, here's why they're so embarrassed. It's now been 1,777 days since the lousy, stinking Gators have beaten the Georgia Bulldogs. You love to go to a casino and see 777s across the slot machine. Well, how about 1777 on our Gatorator Updater? Y'all have a great weekend. See you tonight. Atlanta News First for high school football back Monday. DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews cool down. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for the air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price promised. You can trust them on all of that. Boy, I thought my voice was doing better, and then it just almost gave out on me. Y'all, I can't do a long cool down today. I just can't. I just can't, and I'm sorry. But we'll take a few comments, get ready to get going here. UJ Marine pointing out something that's accurate, which is important, is that it's funny. If DJ Lagway was having a normal DJ Lagway season, what people thought was going to be an expected season for him, Florida actually be in pretty good shape because their defense has played great. It's a really good point, actually. Defense has played very well, but Lagway has just really struggled. Let's see what else. Yeah, the subject here of Arch Manning. Yeah, I mean, at some point in time, it's now or never. Now, I'm always on guard that he'll magically play better come November, I guess. But, I mean, the evaluation here right now was all of this just a media construct? Was all of this just made up the same way we think that Bill Belichick at North Carolina is, or Deion Sanders at Colorado is, or whatever else? Is all of this just famous last name, ludicrous levels of hype? I didn't think it was, because smart people that I knew had bought into it. And so therefore, I, as I tend to do, just trust people who I believe know more than I do. Man, oh man, it is a long way from what I thought. Best quarterback ever, the dumb stuff people like Paul Feinbaum was saying. I never quite believed that, but I thought almost certainly upper tier quarterback, just because you expect him nothing else. I don't care who the last name of the Texas quarterback is. You expect him to be an upper tier quarterback, but it is not that right now. KC on the subject of Florida over Miami. I don't know that anybody predicted Florida to beat Miami, unless somebody in the comment section did. I think we've mostly been talking about, is this a weekend where we get entertainment by the team expected to lose, somehow keeping it closer than experts think? I think it's more along those lines. Chris says the Lagway mechanics are shot. Yeah, I didn't really see any of the game last week, so I can't speak to that. But pretty clearly, these are real struggles. And this would be a huge storyline if not for the fact that Arch Manning has taken a lot of the oxygen out of that when it comes to struggling quarterbacks. All right, let's see what else. Alan Hampton says, I'm normally not very excited about playing Kentucky. My choice for permanent teams would be the Vols, Gators, and whatever Auburn is. Yeah, I mean, it's sad to think that Georgia won't be playing Tennessee anymore. The SEC is changing. It is becoming different. It's going to benefit some rivalries. It's going to hurt some others. And Georgia-Tennessee, at least to a degree, is a rivalry. And we're going to probably see less of that moving forward. That's true. Let's see what else. Jeremy Harbin, the Florida-Miami game is in Hard Rock Stadium down in Miami Gardens. It is a home game for Miami. And I'm guessing they'll probably have a big crowd. Field Mob says, are you aware that Georgia-Bama tickets are more expensive than the SEC championship tickets? What does Kirby expect us to do with that? Yeah, I mean, we talk about this a lot, that the tickets are getting crazy expensive. And this is one of those things where I don't really blame. I mean, this is just market forces at work. It's not like, I mean, the Tennessee game, the ones that Georgia had sold in by Tennessee, the face value was like 270. So that drives the price probably up a little bit. To my knowledge, the face value for Georgia, Alabama is not some crazy number or anything like that. It's just that the secondary market has just exploded, where it seems like the price of some of these tickets seems to double and then double again and then double again and then double again. It's almost becoming nonsensical. It really is. And I've made my spiel on this. I've made, at some point in time, it's a topic I want to revisit. I don't want to hammer it every day because people don't need to hear it every day. But something is going to be lost if college football becomes solely a rich man's proposition. Something is going to be lost if that's the case. This is not an easy solution. Georgia could give the tickets away for free. They'd still be selling for $800 on the secondary market. This is market forces at work and dictating this, and that in itself is not a bad thing. But my dad worked at the post office. My dad's dad worked at the post office. Could a third-generation postal worker son be able to be as big a Georgia fan now as I was then? I don't know. I mean, the type of young kid who gets to go to a lot of Georgia games now, it seems like has a very different profile of, what Dad does for a living, just very different profile. It would seem to stand to reason. And once again, you can't necessarily do anything about it, at least easy solutions. There's no easy solution to this. But it is true that if you're a fan that wants to go to every game, it's just gotten really, really hard. And even if we don't have the easy solution for what you do about it, it doesn't mean we should ignore it as a topic either. Let's see what else. HB on the subject of Glenn Schumann getting a head coaching job. Yeah, I wonder. I mean, I think that Schumann is ready. I'll be honest with you, I think that Todd Hartley's ready. And I'm not looking to wish anybody out the door. I'm really not. But I wonder if we're going to see some Georgia coaches get their chance to be head coaches when this season comes to an end. Because I would definitely have Todd Hartley on my mind when it comes to something like that. It seems like has a very different. Let's see what else. Let me go to Facebook. Thomas Babcock says Tennessee could be Georgia's third permanent rival. Well, nothing's set in stone, but you'll be hard-pressed to find anybody close to this situation that thinks it's going to be Tennessee. If for no other reason, we know what Tennessee's three permanent opponents are likely to be. It's going to be Alabama. You've got to play third Saturday in October. Georgia, I should say Tennessee, Florida has more history than Tennessee, Georgia does. So they'll probably play that every year. And the in-state rivalry game against Vanderbilt, of course they want to play that every year. And it's an in-state rival. They probably should. So those are the three that Tennessee's going to have. That's why we know it's not Georgia-Tennessee, because Tennessee's already got its three. And honestly, if there was a fourth, I mean, Tennessee's going to argue for Kentucky for obvious reasons. But once again, they played for the Bourbon Barrel or whatever it was. So, I mean, the truth is that it seems like Georgia and Tennessee have a lot of history because it's recent history. And we did a whole thing on this last Friday. It seems like they have a lot of history together. But as told over the period of a century, it's actually not as much history as you might think. Field Mob asking about when the permanent rivalry stuff comes out. It'll probably leak earlier than that, but the TV show comes on at 7 p.m. Keith Ritchie says Georgia-Auburn is the South's oldest rivalry period. It says Virginia-North Carolina was played later that year, 1892. Yeah, I mean, obviously Georgia-Auburn officially known as the Deep South's oldest rivalry. I don't really know. I mean, there's all kinds of, historical footnotes about that compared to, like, say, North Carolina, Virginia, or something like that. But yeah, that's interesting. Chef Jay Bowen says, I hope you get some rest for your voice. No karaoke tonight. Yeah, indeed, that's the case. And what's funny is I think I told y'all this. I used to, the problem is my voice has just been overused because I do the show. We do 1 million hours. I also go to my kids' games. I'm yelling there and doing stuff like that. son played football yesterday, and then when he's been playing baseball, I've just been clapping. I haven't been yelling. I've really been trying to. If I can just get it to be better, I'm moving forward. I'm gonna have to be a lot more careful with it. I've just overused it. And I'm gonna have to be careful with it. DF, which I guess is whatever, but the permanent rivalries and the schedule comes out on Tuesday. Let's see what's going on here on Facebook again. If I said this right, is it Jazlias? Did I say it right, Jazlias? Yeah, I think that Billy Napier could be in some real trouble at Florida. I do. It's early enough in the season that he could save himself, and obviously a win against Miami would go a long way towards doing that. Not impossible to think that might happen, but we thought that Napier was on pretty thin ice a year ago. This season has not done much to change much of that. Florida reportedly has raised the money to pay the buyout, or at least has access to that money. So, yeah, I do think that Napier could be in some real trouble. I do. Let us see what else we're going to go. Bill Sanders on the subject of, in big games a year ago, and, we're not reveling in this. We're just pointing out that, Carson Beck did throw a lot of interceptions. 3 in the Bama game, 3 in the Texas game, and, listen, he also helped bring Georgia back. And you feel like you have to caveat things in 19 different ways because people get a little sensitive about stuff like this. It's just an objective fact, and that is its own defense, is that he did have some interceptions in big games a year ago. Be watching for that against Florida on Saturday to see if he really wants to demonstrate him a better quarterback and what Shannon Dawson seems like to be a system he's very comfortable in, then playing a big game against Florida, a defense that's played well this season, would go a long way towards proving that too. So it doesn't have to be, we're just watching for something negative. We may really demonstrate that Carson Beck really is comfortable again. Maybe that's the case. All right, final comments. Alan Hampton asking about a voice coach. So years ago, I did go to a voice coach. The truth is like real voice coaching, the kind of thing that actors get. By the time I went to a voice coach for the very first time, which has been years ago, the real voice coaching, the kind of thing where you speak from down here and you really get it out of your chest, that ship had probably sailed. That I probably needed to start doing that in my early 20s, if not as a teenager. By the time, I was getting involved in some of that kind of stuff, I was probably close-ish to 30. The idea that I'm going to really reach, because if you think about acting, movie acting now doesn't require quite as much projection, but most actors start on the stage, which if you're in a theater listening to a performance, an actor, the actor has to really project his or her voice, and that comes from here. They blow out their words using their air. And if you watch TV, you'll notice this, the way in which actors are just really good at projecting their words. Singers are like this too. Have you ever listened to a singer talk? They talk differently than we do. You may notice this. They talk differently than we do. They project their words because most of them are trained in some fashion. I'm just not quite trained in the same way. I know some vocal exercises, can do some, but I'm just not quite trained in the same way. And I do probably speak from my throat a little bit more than the average person does, or at least the average professional speaker does. Probably do a little bit more just from right here. And I can definitely feel it from right here, right now. Okay, so now here's what SEM points out. And this is, we're going to get going to this. So it's funny, he said you got to drink a lot of water. And it is funny, like, that's what everything kind of goes back to, that, drinking a lot of water. And you'd be surprised, not surprised, but you'd be, I guess, impressed, maybe, or whatever I'm trying to say. It would be notable how much water I really am trying to drink right now. And, it does seem like it comes back to that. So that's my goal. I'm going to drink a bunch of water. And sorry for making the thing about me. Y'all should know I talk about myself very, very little. It's not something I'm interested in. There's no less interesting topic than whatever's going on with me. So I'm sorry for making this about me. But I have been a little concerned about it. If I'm being honest and just being vulnerable, I have been a little concerned about it. Let me finish with this to bring it back to football, and then we'll go. Chris asked about our game tonight, 8 p.m. on Atlanta News First. 8 p.m. on that. And then Hurley Jones says, what's the answer to creating a pressure package on defense? Man-to-man is risky, and Mendoza has not been given enough snaps if he's the answer. Yeah, look, the Mendoza hype before the season began, I think he's a good player. I'm glad that Georgia has him. I'm guessing he's going to have a role. But some of what you heard about Elo Mendoza, I mean, if you'll notice, we make a living amplifying hype about Georgia. We did very little of the Elo Mendoza stuff. And much the same way I always tell you to notice what you don't hear, when there are people saying whatever and we're not really amplifying that message, just notice, especially when we, have built a business around, hey, guess what? People are saying good things about Georgia. When we're not amplifying some of that stuff, you should probably take it as a reason we're not. But I do think it would be better if Georgia did have the game wrecker on the outside edge. That obviously made getting the pass pressure easier. And I know David Pollack said some stuff about this recently, and I'm glad that he did. They're clearly going to have to find more of this. I guess the one thing I'm going to hold out hope for is for teams that play even just a little bit slower. Texas plays a lot slower. Georgia really got after their quarterbacks last year. For teams that play a little bit slower, maybe it's a little bit easier. And some of this is going to have to come from sending pressure. It's been inside linebackers in the past. It's been corners and safeties. They're going to have to do some of that, almost no doubt. So we'll see if they get their chance to do it. And as the cornerback play continues to solidify, maybe that gives an extra second for some of those guys up front to get there too. That's obviously going to be a big deal. So good stuff. Thanks for being here. Y'all check out RS Andrews online, rsandrews.com, for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price is promised. You can trust them on that today. Enjoy your weekend. I would love to have you tune in tonight to see us on Atlanta News First. Good game. Blessed Trinity, Hebrew, and Christian. Hope you enjoy the weekend without Georgia football. Plenty of games to watch. Then we get here on Monday. It is game face on, getting ready for Georgia-Bama. That is going to be a fun one. I can't wait for it. Talk to you then. DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. Have a great weekend, everybody.